Helga, this is really an extraordinary occasion. It's probably a part of our audience should learn to know something more about Europe. So I want to bring this question that we got from Belgium. This is from Guillaume Dubost from the Agora Erasmus. Greetings from Belgium. It's from 1.5 years now. We've been in a deep political crisis in Belgium about building a government. And it looks as if the opposition to the austerity policy has greatly weakened. There are some elected officials who are who have brought in a proposal for a Glass-Steagall separation of the banks and who are against the bailouts, but they're not really organizing publicly for it. And we see that the Belgian people are, in a certain sense, have given up. There's just no resistance. Nevertheless, Friedrich Schiller wrote in his writing over the Netherlands that in the 17th century the people were able to free themselves from imperial domination, even if it didn't always succeed. And the result of this fight for freedom was a long period of development. This was aided at the beginning by Mercator and Erasmus and Nikolaus of Hudenkaufen. And we want to revive this culture. I think that would be decisive to deal with the situation today. And I would like to know what you could tell us about the importance of classical culture in the development of history, of humanity.
Also ich denke mal, dass das letztlich das Allerentscheidendste ist.
Well, I think that is the most decisive. I was just thinking about it because you mentioned the downfall of the Netherlands. That's one of the most interesting writings of all from Schiller, because it also had a long-term effect. For example,
Ludwig von Wolzogen hat in
a relative of Schiller, von Wolzogen,
diese Schrift studiert, also den Abfall der Niederlande,
studied this writing by Schiller in his youth, the downfall of the Netherlands. And then he devised a strategy to a strategy for the defeat, to defeat Napoleon. And so this was inspired by how the Netherlands could get free of Spain. So the idea was you couldn't defeat Napoleon by direct confrontation, but you had to bring him in the broad area of Russia. So you had a war of attrition, and that was the way they defeated him. And it's known that Napoleon came into Russia, I think in November, and snow fell. And then the Russians themselves burned Moscow to destroy Napoleon's plans. His idea, Napoleon's idea, was to have a quarter during the winter, to have horses and everything, but they just destroyed that. They burned the city, there was no food, there was no animals, they were taking the food out the city, so Napoleon had to turn the direction and go. And when he was withdrawing, the Russian troops attacked him from behind. And there were a few decisive battles, and that was the defeat of the Napoleonic army, which was made up of a huge army, and was then afterwards only a few handful of people.
Praktisch dann den Napoleon endgültig besiegt bei den Freiheitskriegen in Deutschland.
The liberation wars in Germany was the final defeat of Napoleon.
Yevgeny
Velikov, who is a member of the Academy of Sciences, he made a quite shocking proposal to develop rockets, defensive rockets, which were supposed to destroy potentially incoming nuclear rockets aimed at Russia, destroying them while they're incoming above Russia. And to do that, to avoid those nuclear warheads from hitting directly onto Russian territory. And when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about this other strategy that burned Moscow in order to avoid Napoleon winning. So to save the fatherland, you are ready to sacrifice certain things. And that was also the same method that Hitler was defeated with in the Second World War. So if you have this kind of knowledge of history of knowledge of great literature, this has a type of long-term effect which makes history. And I think we need wise politicians who are steeped in classical literature and culture, and who not only think about their own district, or even worse, who are just the lackeys of the financial oligarchy, which is the case in almost all European governments. If you look at 4 or 5 years of the financial crisis, these people have not implemented any reform, any serious change. So we need a change also from the base of the country, from the grassroots. We have to, this re-education after the Second World War destroyed a lot of things. People were cut off from their culture. For example, with the Frankfurt School, if you think of writings from Adorno or Benjamin or others, they consciously tried to destroy classical culture. And then also, obviously, you have the massive operations by the Congress for Cultural Freedom, who tried in all of Europe getting rid of classical culture, bringing in the Regie Theater, mixing classical culture with terrible modern atonal music. And now it should be clear that we can only get out of this crisis by a totally different axiomatic of thinking. One, we need an orientation to the natural sciences, meaning not opinion and a variety of stupid opinions, which then somehow get into a criteria of truth, but you have to have a scientific thinking. Universal processes have to be the basis for proof of principle, because the universal physical principle be recognized in China and Africa. So a rationality of thinking in concordance with the laws of the universe. And also the same principle in great classical art, music, poetry, also architecture and sculpturing, but especially music and poetry. Because you have the same, those cultural principles are recognizable. I mean, it's known that music is a universal language, but the same is true for international poetry. And if people come to the point where they understand that again, that is where the liberation occurs. And especially youth, they have to realize how they're being screwed, they're being defrauded. They're being betrayed by a cult of ugliness.
Eigentlich ein einziges Sammelsurium ist von Schrecklichkeit.
And the whole youth culture is just a gathering of disgusting things. Lady Gaga, just with a few pieces of clothes on herself, or satanic fetish things, all areas. The beauty which you find in classical culture is being trampled upon and covered over. And I think if we get young people to deal with classical culture, to understand that the oligarchy has an interest that they, the youth, fill themselves with this garbage, well then, if they understand that, they will fight for their freedom if they have an access to this type of culture. And I'm very optimistic that, for example, the German Lied, those songs composed by Schubert, by Mozart, by Beethoven, or others, this can spark the soul the same way as the spirituals did for the civil rights movement in the United States. So if you find young, engaged, active people who realize that classical culture and creativity absolutely have something to do with each other, and that you don't want this oligarchical elite anymore, you don't want to be used by them, then we will have a movement for Renaissance. It will be possible. This happened after the 14th Renaissance too.
Ich denke, ein goldenes Zeitalter wie die italienische Renaissance des 15. Jahrhunderts ist in erreichbarer Weite.
And I think this kind of new age, like in the 15th century, this is in immediate reach.